What if the role you're proudest of, the one the world praises you for, quietly clips your wings? Not because it's bad, but because it's incomplete. Think about it. We're taught to pick a lane, be the caring one, the brilliant one, the spiritual one, the achiever who never misses. You wear the mask, people clap, and you become reliable. But somewhere under the applause, you feel it, a tug, a soft heat in the chest, a signal that says, there's more. A monk once gave language to that feeling. When asked who the true self is, he said, like a spark from fire. The flame and the spark are the same in substance. The spark isn't a fragment. It isn't lesser. It isn't separate. It is the fire, briefly carrying a name and a shape. That image changes everything. If your essence is a spark of the same living energy that runs the entire universe, then the labels you've worn, mother, lover, professional, mystic, are not your final identity. They're costumes for the stage. They're useful, they're beautiful, but they aren't you. Here's the tension most people never resolve. The mask keeps life tidy. With a mask on, you know what to wear, how to speak, which choices to make. You don't disappoint anyone, at least not openly. But the mask also requires sacrifices. The mother who never allows herself pleasure, the lover who despises structure, the professional who dismisses feelings, the mystic who rejects her humanity in pursuit of purity. Each role brings gifts. Each role, when overused, becomes a cage. Now imagine a life where you can move between roles fluidly, not as reactions, but as choices. One moment, you're deeply responsible. Another, you choose joy without guilt. At work, you're focused and sharp. In stillness, you're grounded in something larger than thought. That fluidity isn't chaos. It's integration, and it's the heart of what today's story reveals. You're about to hear how a set of ideas from depth psychology, shaped in part by a brilliant but often overlooked collaborator, became a map for modern identity. Not as trivia, but as tools, 4 feminine archetypes that quietly run the show for many people, regardless of gender. You'll also see why the culture keeps rewarding you for doubling down on just one, and why that reward structure breeds burnout, guilt, and the private fear that you're living at 60% of your capacity. This isn't theory for theory's sake. It's practical psychology wrapped in a gripping human story. A notable thinker at the dawn of modern psychology, a gifted analyst whose influence threaded through his most famous ideas. A marriage, a collaboration, a triangle that scandalized polite society, yet sparked some of the boldest insights of the last century. Out of that messy, very human history came a framework that explains why your closet looks the way it does, why your calendar overflows the way it does, why you judge certain people on sight, and why some choices feel impossible, even when nothing is stopping you. Let's make this personal. Picture the last time you said no to something you wanted. Time with friends, an unapologetic spa day, a new creative project, a hard conversation that would set you free. Which voice shut it down? The responsible one whispering, "Good mothers don't do that." The free spirit insisting, "Commitment kills joy." The executive calculating, "This could cost me status." The saint warning, "That's not what a good person does." Those voices aren't random. They're patterns, and the moment you recognize the pattern, you gain leverage over it. There's a reason this video won't try to convince you to pick the right archetype. There isn't one. All the point is to notice the default you've been performing, see the shadow it creates, and reclaim the unlived parts of you that got pushed into the basement. When you do, guilt loosens. Resentment softens, choices multiply. Life gets bigger, not louder, not busier, bigger. If all that sounds abstract, stay with me. You'll get concrete examples, friction points, and the exact kinds of emotional triggers that show you where your mask is glued on too tight. You'll see why certain women fear fun, why certain high achievers struggle to let love in, why spiritual seekers secretly punish themselves, and why pleasure chasers burn out on novelty. More importantly, you'll see the moves that integrate these parts without blowing up your life. We'll start where the spark begins, an ancient idea about the soul, revived in plain language for modern life, then woven into a conversation about identity, autonomy, and power. From there, we'll trace the human story, how collaboration, controversy, and raw honesty forged a framework people still use to this day. Then we'll break the framework down into something you can work with this week. No mystic gatekeeping, no academic fog, just a clear map and permission to be more than one thing. You don't have to abandon the mask that got you here. You just don't have to mistake it for your face. If the world is a stage, play your role brilliantly and learn the others. That's not pretending. That's mastery. And mastery is what turns a spark into a steady flame. But theory alone won't carry you. You need the story, the characters, and the friction that made these ideas indispensable. Let's light the match. A young monk in India is asked, "Who is the true self?" His answer, "The self is like a spark from fire. The spark is not less than the fire. It is the fire, briefly separate in name and shape." If you hold that image for more than a moment, something rearranges inside you. You realize how easily we confuse costumes for identity. The spark's essence doesn't change when it arcs away from the flame. It glows with the same substance, the same heat, the same possibility. It only appears separate because of its form. Translate that metaphor to your life. You were born whole. Before anyone handed you a script, you existed as pure potential, curious, responsive, alive. Then life happened. Family expectations hardened into rules. Cultural values carved grooves into your choices. Reward and punishment trained your nervous system to prefer certain behaviors. To function, you learned a role. That role helped you belong. It also narrowed your expression. The spark didn't dim. It was covered. When we talk about personal development, most advice tries to sharpen the mask. Be more efficient. Be more compassionate. Be more disciplined. Be more surrendered. We change the costume, polish the edges, repaint the surface, and then wonder why the ache remains. The spark image points in a different direction. Instead of optimizing the mask, it asks you to find the part of you that doesn't need a mask to be powerful. This is where non-dual philosophy becomes practical. Non-dual simply means not two. There isn't a separate you and the rest of reality. There's one field showing up as many faces. Applied to identity, this means your deepest self isn't in competition with your roles. It holds them. It moves through them. It can mother without erasing desire. It can love without fearing stability. It can achieve without worshiping status. It can seek transcendence without denying human mess. So why don't we live this way by default? Because the psyche is clever. It builds a persona, literally a mask to interface with society. That's adaptive. But the persona then insists it is the whole story. It says, "I am the caring one," or "I am the free one," or "I am the winner," or "I am the pure one." The more life rewards that mask, the more we invest in it. And the more we invest, the more threatening it feels to admit we also need play, commitment, rest, risk, tenderness, power, humility, beauty, and boundaries. The mask becomes both our protection and our prison. The spark from fire metaphor breaks that trance. If your essence matches the flame, then your capacity is not limited to one costume. You can broaden your repertoire without betraying yourself. You can say yes to new expressions and still be you. This is not a license to abandon responsibility or to float through life unmoored. It's an invitation to choose roles deliberately instead of being drafted by fear and habit. Picture 4 dials on a console: nurture, pleasure, ambition, spirit. Most people crank one dial to 10 and dim the others to 2. Then they explain their life by pointing to the dial they favor. I'm just built this way, but those dials move. They can all rise. Integration looks like skillfully adjusting them to match the moment, caring for a child with full presence, then claiming a restorative afternoon without apology, pitching a bold idea with sharp focus, then tending the body and the inner life, so achievement doesn't become a hollow performance. This inner flexibility isn't mysticism for mysticism's sake. It's emotional freedom. It's also pragmatic power. When you can switch lenses, you stop fighting reality. You read the room without abandoning yourself. You negotiate without shrinking. You love without dissolving. You rest without guilt. And when shame flares, as it will, you recognize it for what it is, evidence that a mask is trying to keep control. Here's the practical pivot. Insight matters, but insight alone doesn't liberate. You need a map that shows you how the persona forms, how its shadow grows, and how to bring the rejected parts back into orbit. That map exists. It developed in a charged human setting, a collaboration that wove theory with experience, genius with controversy. From that weave came a framework for the 4 primary female-coded roles many of us perform. Knowingly or not, understand them, and you'll understand your triggers. Work with them, and you'll expand your choices. But we don't get this framework without the story that birthed it. A marriage, a muse, a partnership that defied convention, and ideas that still shape modern psychology. Let's go there. But the framework didn't just emerge in a vacuum. It was lived, debated, and refined in a triangle that shocked polite society. At the dawn of modern psychology, a young Swiss doctor began mapping the interior world with unusual courage. He studied dreams, symbols, and the strange ways the unconscious moves us. He wasn't alone. A brilliant woman walked beside him, first as a patient, then as a collaborator, then as a force in her own right. Her name was Toni Wolff. If you know the headlines, you know the controversy. If you know the work, you know her fingerprints are everywhere. Wolff had a gift for pattern. She could feel where an idea wanted to go. In sessions, in study, in the long mornings spent poring over manuscripts, she helped give shape to concepts that would outlive them both, the inner feminine and masculine currents inside every psyche, the shadow we hide from ourselves, the long arc of becoming a whole person rather than a polished role. She also offered something rare, language that linked grand theory to the ordinary tensions of daily life. Among her most practical contributions was a simple, potent grouping of feminine modes that show up across cultures: the mother, the lover, the Amazon, aka the professional, and the medial woman, think mystic. Don't let the labels distract you. They're pointers, not prisons. Each stands for a cluster of instincts, values, and reflexes that help a person survive and succeed in a particular social world. Each carries a bright side you can be proud of, and a shadow that will quietly run your life if you don't notice it. Why does this matter now? Because modern life still rewards single-note identities. Corporate cultures love the tireless achiever. Families rely on the endlessly responsible caretaker. Digital culture glamorizes the eternally desirable free spirit. Spiritual circles sometimes idolize the seeker who seems above it all. Praise is powerful narcotic. The more we're praised for one mode, the more we suppress the others. That suppression doesn't disappear. It sinks. It becomes the shadow, resentment, guilt, envy, self-righteousness, compulsions dressed up as virtues. Wolff wasn't interested in shaming any type. Her point was practical: notice your default so you can integrate what you've sidelined. She also recognized context. In eras when women's roles were tightly policed, these modes became social funnels. You were the mother, or the other woman, or the professional spinster, or the holy outsider. Today, the costumes have shifted, but the underlying dynamics remain. The names can be updated: caretaker, sensualist, executive, mystic, but the energy is the same. There's another layer. These 4 modes echo a deeper blueprint of the psyche: feeling, sensing, thinking, intuiting. Pair them loosely, and you can see the through lines. The mother leans into feeling. The lover leans into sensing and embodied pleasure. The professional leans into thinking and strategic order. The mystic leans into intuition and symbolic meaning. None of this is a rigid system. It's a mirror. You look, you recognize yourself, and suddenly your random triggers aren't random anymore. Of course, ideas develop inside real lives, and the lives around these ideas were messy. The collaboration that refined them unfolded alongside a marriage, raising eyebrows then and now. For some, that messiness undermines the work. For others, it humanizes it. Either way, the tension shaped the insights. When 3 adults navigate love, duty, vocation, and public scrutiny, they run every pattern this framework describes: responsibility versus freedom, devotion versus ambition, spirit versus flesh. The lab wasn't sterile. It was life. Why bring any of this up in a channel built on clarity and practicality? Because origin stories matter. They remind you that the people who gave us our most useful tools were not abstract minds floating above the world. They were pulses and mistakes and late-night arguments, trying to name what they saw in themselves and in their patients. That gives you permission to use the tools the same way, not as dogma, but as instruments for your real, complicated life. So yes, give credit where it's due. Recognize Wolff's role. See how her lens captured social patterns that still govern our calendars and closets. And then do the only thing that honors that legacy: put the framework to work. Name your default. Spot the shadow. Practice integration. If you do, you'll feel the spark again, not as a concept, but as energy you can live from. We'll make it concrete now. You'll meet each archetype with its light and its cost. You'll likely see yourself in more than one. Good. That's the point. Recognition breaks the trance. From there, choices multiply. But first, understand the triangle that pushed these ideas into the world, because the friction explains why the framework bites so hard in real life. Publicly, the story sounds simple: a pioneering psychologist, a respected wife from a prominent family, and a brilliant collaborator whose presence was both indispensable and scandalous. Privately, it was complicated in all the ordinary human ways: longing, loyalty, duty, pride, fear, and the relentless daily work of turning ideas into something coherent. You don't need every biographical detail to grasp the psychological lesson. When 3 lives intertwine around work and love, every archetype gets stress-tested in real time. Consider the mother mode in this context: responsibility, civility, social expectation, the invisible labor that lets a public figure function. Consider the professional mode: intellectual rigor, hours spent in manuscripts, the drive to build something that lasts. Consider the lover mode: the spark that ignites devotion to the work and the person, the pleasure in ideas and presence. Consider the mystic mode: the pull toward meaning beyond convention, the intuition that says, "This matters," even if society calls it unacceptable. When those 4 dials move at once, sparks fly, insight follows. Tension reveals shadow. Responsibility without boundaries curdles into self-erasure and quiet rage. Achievement without heart becomes sterile power-seeking. Pleasure without commitment turns into avoidance dressed as freedom. Spirituality without humanity becomes judgment and denial. In that triangle, you can watch each mode at its best and worst: the capacity to hold a household together under scrutiny, the discipline to turn raw thoughts into frameworks, the aliveness that makes collaboration electric, the courage to follow meaning beyond approval. This is not gossip. It's a mirror. Most of us run smaller versions of the same triangle: our career, our intimate life, and our inner life pulling at each other in different seasons. When work surges, love strains. When romance opens, ambition softens. When spiritual longing intensifies, daily responsibilities feel heavy, or at times, beautifully lighter. If you only have one mode to meet all three demands, you'll break. If you can rotate modes with awareness, you'll adapt without betraying yourself. There's another reason to look at the triangle. It inoculates you against perfectionism. The people who helped name these patterns did not live in clean lines. They made trade-offs. They triggered each other. They navigated the moral codes of their time, sometimes clumsily, sometimes nobly, knowing that frees you to apply the framework without waiting to be saintly. Integration isn't about being perfect. It's about being honest and skillful. It also explains why these ideas still provoke. Any framework that asks you to admit you've been over-identified with a role will trigger defenses. Culture often enforces those roles. Family systems rely on them. Industries profit from them. Questioning your default can feel like disloyalty. That's why the spark metaphor matters. You don't abandon your people or your work when you integrate. You serve them better because you're not secretly resentful, brittle, or hollow. The triangle also underscores how a collaborative partner can be both muse and mirror. A muse doesn't just inspire, she exposes the limits of your current mask. A mirror doesn't just reflect, it shows the parts you've refused to see. That's uncomfortable and fertile. For many of us, the muse is a friend, a mentor, a colleague, or a book that won't let us stay asleep. The goal isn't to import someone else's life drama, it's to let friction illuminate your rigidities and then soften them with integration. So here's the practical takeaway from the tension. Use conflict as data. When you feel judged, ask which mask is being threatened. When you feel superior, ask which shadow you're projecting. When you feel trapped, ask which unlived part is asking for air. These questions are surgical. They cut through stories to the structure underneath. With that lens, we can finally meet the 4 archetypes not as stereotypes, but as living forces inside you. You'll see the gift each brings, the mess each creates when it runs the show alone, and the specific moves that bring them into balance. Let's start with the one culture often rewards first and loudest, the caretaker whose love fuels everything, until it quietly exhausts her. The mother archetype is warmth made visible. She remembers birthdays without reminders. She senses needs before they're spoken. She plans, protects, and provides with a steadiness that lets others grow. In families, she is the ground. In teams, she is the glue. Even when she's not biologically a parent, you know her by the way people relax around her. Things work because she is watching. The gift is undeniable. Devotion, reliability, fierce tenderness. The world runs on this energy. The shadow is just as real: over-responsibility, guilt, and the slow erosion of self. When mother becomes a mask rather than a choice, boundaries blur. "I'll handle it" becomes a reflex. Pleasure feels suspicious. Rest feels like theft. Anger gets buried until it leaks as martyrdom or collapse. Praise keeps the pattern alive. "You're amazing. I don't know how you do it." and the calendar becomes proof of worth. Common triggers reveal the shadow. Being 5 minutes late to pick up sparks disproportionate shame. Asking for help feels like failure. Watching someone else take a carefree weekend stirs judgment. Must be nice and longing. I want that at the same time. Romantic spontaneity feels dangerous because it threatens the schedule that keeps life from falling apart. Even career moves are filtered through care. How will this affect everyone else? This isn't kindness, it's compulsion dressed as virtue. Integration doesn't mean abandoning care. It means adding two missing elements: permission and reciprocity. Permission to choose yourself without apologizing. Reciprocity that requires other adults to carry their share. Practically, that looks like scheduling pleasure as a non-negotiable, asking partners and kids to own tasks end to end, resisting the urge to fix feelings to avoid discomfort, letting others experience consequences instead of softening the world for them. The first attempts will feel wrong. That's the old mask screaming. There's also a body component. Mother overdrive often lives in the nervous system as hypervigilance. Downregulation helps breath practices, slow walks without a productivity angle, 10 minutes of lying on the floor to remind your body that nothing will implode if you pause. If you're wired to equate stillness with danger, you'll have to retrain that reflex. The payoff is huge. A calmer baseline, clearer boundaries, and a return of joy that isn't contingent on earning it. Relationships shift when you integrate. People used to your endless capacity may protest. Some will test your new limits. Hold steady. Your compassion is more potent when it includes you. Your yes gains weight because your no is real. Kids learn resilience. Partners step into adulthood. Teams become teams instead of satellites. You don't love less. You love cleaner. What about the lover energy that mother often suppresses? That's usually the first bridge back to yourself. Deliberate, guilt-free pleasure, food, music, movement, beauty, experienced without multitasking. Start small, a long bath while someone else handles bedtime. An afternoon with friends that isn't owed back through extra chores. Dressing for your own delight. These aren't luxuries, they're repairs. They remind your system that aliveness is not a threat to care, it's fuel for it. Lastly, watch the story that says, "If I don't do it, no one will." Sometimes that's true. Often, it's a control strategy to avoid uncertainty. Let things be done badly for a while. Let the room be messy. Let a partner learn by failing. It's not neglect, it's respect. And the space it creates is where your spark catches air. Now meet the counterweight, the energy that chases life with appetite and turns the world back into color. The lover archetype is magnetism. She moves toward what feels alive, music that lifts the skin, food that wakes the mouth, conversation that sparks laughter, touch that dissolves time. You feel her presence because she's present to sensation, to beauty, to the right now. People orbit this energy not just because it's attractive, but because it reminds them they're alive. Her gift is vitality, the courage to feel, to risk, to play. She brings spontaneity to rigid rooms and warmth to cold systems. She also keeps relationships breathing. The shadow is avoidance. When lover becomes a mask, commitment looks like confinement, responsibility looks like doom, and the first hint of boredom feels like a sign to bolt. Novelty becomes medicine. Promises become threats. Pleasure, unmoored from values, slides into compulsion. The tells are easy to spot. Calendars full of last-minute plans and empty of long-term projects. A pattern of relationships that start hot and end with a familiar story. It just didn't feel right anymore. Money that flows out as quickly as it flows in because the future is always later. creative work that bursts and stalls, a secret envy of people who can build lasting structures, and a louder contempt for those structures to hide the envy. Integration asks the lover to reclaim two virtues she often mislabels as enemies: devotion and structure. Devotion isn't captivity, it's depth. Structure isn't prison, it's the frame that makes art possible. Practically, that looks like choosing a few commitments worth being bored for one relationship you'll keep showing up to through seasons, one craft you'll practice past the plateau, one steady habit that protects your nervous system. The paradox is gorgeous. When you trust yourself to stay, freedom expands. Desire stops running from itself. There's a language shift too. Replace "I don't want to be trapped" with "I want to be free" inside a promise. Replace "I hate routines" with "I choose rhythms that protect my energy." Replace "I'll lose myself if I commit" with "I'll find more of myself by bringing all of me to what matters." These aren't affirmations for the mirror. They're orientation changes that rewire behavior. The body is your ally here. The same sensitivity that chases pleasure can anchor presence. Practices that slow you down without numbing. Dance as meditation, breath that lengthens the exhale, strength training that builds containment. Teach your system that intensity can live inside steadiness. Intimacy benefits, work benefits, and ironically, pleasure intensifies because it's not trying to anesthetize fear. Watch for the professional shadow you might have projected on serious people. Underneath the eye roll may live admiration. Borrow what you admire without abandoning your heat. Put dates with your craft on the calendar the same way you'd plan a night out. Keep them. Give your future self gifts your present self can savor later. Saved money, finished songs, deep trust, clean mornings. The payoff isn't moral. It's more joy with less chaos. The lover's radiance stops burning through people and projects and starts warming them. Desire matures from impulse into current, and the spark becomes a hearth. Of course, some of you live on the other pole, the builders who turn ideas into reality, but secretly fear their own softness. The professional archetype is the world's engine. She builds, she organizes, she climbs. While others dream, she drafts plans. While others hesitate, she executes. The professional thrives on goals, structure, and measurable results. She doesn't just imagine a future, she creates it, brick by brick, deadline by deadline. In modern culture, this energy is worshipped. It looks like power, and often it is. The gift is mastery. The professional knows how to turn raw effort into achievement. She carves out independence, financial stability, and respect. She often becomes a model of self-reliance, the woman who doesn't need rescuing, who negotiates her worth, who leads with precision. Society rewards this energy with promotions, status, and applause. On the surface, it looks flawless. But the shadow tells a harsher story. The professional can grow allergic to vulnerability. Feelings are filed away as distractions. Relationships are negotiated like contracts. Success becomes a shield, not just from failure, but from intimacy. The fear isn't laziness, it's loss of control. If someone else steps inside her carefully built life, will they rearrange it? Will they drain the resources she fought to secure? The professional's deepest fear is not failure, it's dependence. Look at the tells. Work email checked at midnight. Vacations disguised as remote productivity. Pride in saying, "I don't need anyone," but loneliness echoing in the quiet hours. Partnerships that look impressive on paper, but feel transactional. A body that whispers fatigue, ignored until it screams. The mask of strength can become a cage of isolation. Integration isn't about dropping ambition, it's about balancing it with humanity. The professional thrives when she remembers she is more than her resume. The key is bringing in the lover and the mystic energies. The lover softens her edges with joy and spontaneity. The mystic reminds her that not everything can be scheduled or solved. Together, they temper the rigidity that keeps the professional locked in her own fortress. Practical moves matter. Start by carving out time that isn't optimized. Not another networking dinner disguised as leisure. Real unstructured hours where laughter, creativity, or silence have room to land. Test letting someone else lead for once. A partner planning the trip, a friend choosing the restaurant, a colleague handling the project details. The discomfort will feel like chaos at first. Stay with it. Control is not safety. Trust is. The professional also needs to notice how she uses achievement as a substitute for love. Promotions cannot hug you back. Bank accounts don't laugh with you. Awards don't sit with you when you're sick. Recognize that the very independence you've built can starve you of connection. Dependency isn't weakness. It's interdependence, the kind that fuels sustainable success. Teams outperform soloists. Partnerships outlast contracts. Families outlove empires. The body again provides clues. Professionals often carry tension in the jaw, shoulders, and stomach. Practices that release control physically. Yoga that emphasizes surrender, massages where you can't do anything. Breathwork that melts rigidity. Train the nervous system to tolerate softness. The more the body learns to relax, the easier it becomes to allow emotional intimacy. And here's the paradox. When the professional allows softness, her effectiveness multiplies. A leader who listens deeply earns more loyalty. A partner who shows vulnerability deepens trust. A woman who knows how to rest makes sharper decisions. Integration doesn't dilute her power. It refines it. The ultimate shift is identity. Success is no longer proof of worth. It becomes expression of choice. You still climb, still achieve, still build, but from freedom, not compulsion. And suddenly, the professional is not alone at the top of her tower. She's surrounded by a circle of relationships that thrive because she let herself be more than a resume. But if the professional fears losing control in the external world, the mystic wrestles with a different trap, the urge to rise so far above the world that she forgets to live in it. The mystic archetype lives with one foot in another world. She feels the invisible currents under ordinary life. Intuition, symbolism, synchronicity. While others chase status or safety, she hungers for meaning. She asks the questions most people bury. What is consciousness? Why am I here? What lies beyond appearances? For centuries, the mystic has been the healer, the oracle, the visionary. In modern times, she might be a spiritual guide, an artist channeling archetypes, or simply the friend who reads the room before anyone speaks. The gift is depth. The mystic sees patterns others miss. She reminds us that we are more than consumers, workers, or roles. She can translate suffering into wisdom, emptiness into openness, endings into beginnings. Without the mystic, culture starves on surfaces. But the shadow is subtle and seductive. The mystic can confuse transcendence with escape.
If the professional is addicted to doing, the mystic can be addicted to detachment.
Bills go unpaid because money is an illusion. Relationships fracture because she prefers ideals over messy humans. Guilt festers when she inevitably breaks her own standard of purity. Judgment sharpens. She condemns others as materialistic or asleep, blind to her own avoidance. Instead of integration, she lives in spiritual bypass, using lofty language to hide from human wounds. The tells are clear once you look: a pattern of abandoning commitments in the name of higher callings, a tendency to judge others harshly while privately struggling with the same flaws, a body neglected, underfed, overstrained, or treated as an inconvenience, a deep shame when anger, desire, or selfishness erupt, because the mask of goodness can't hold them. The mystic shadow doesn't just avoid, it punishes. Integration means grounding. The mystic must remember the point of vision is embodiment. Insights aren't meant to float. They're meant to shape life. The task is not to reject the world, but to bring depth into it. Money can be sacred when exchanged consciously. Relationships can be spiritual laboratories. Anger can be a teacher. Mess can coexist with meaning. Practical moves? Anchor spirituality in daily practices that touch the body and the world. Cook a nourishing meal and bless it instead of fasting endlessly. Keep a budget as an act of stewardship, not greed. Tend to friendships even when they're inconvenient. Allow yourself to laugh, flirt, and stumble without labeling it unspiritual. If purity is your prison, humanity is your key. The body again is the portal. The mystic often dissociates, floating above sensation. Practices that root awareness, gardening, dancing barefoot, weightlifting, remind her that divinity is in flesh as much as in vision. Letting herself sweat, ache, or hunger reconnects her to the ordinary miracle of being alive. The shift in language matters too. Replace "I don't belong here" with "I bring depth here." Replace "the world is corrupt" with "the world is unfinished, and I get to help." Replace "I must be good" with "I am whole, even in my mess." These reframes cut the cords of shame and restore vitality. When the mystic integrates, her vision fuels creation instead of withdrawal. She becomes not a judge above the world, but a guide within it. She shows others that spirit and matter are not enemies, but partners. And she discovers that the spark doesn't need to choose between transcendence and embodiment. It is both, always was. Now that you've met all four archetypes, the mother, the lover, the professional, and the mystic, the real question emerges: what lies beneath them? What happens when the mask cracks and the true self steps forward? Every role we've explored, the nurturer, the free spirit, the builder, the seeker, is a mask, useful, beautiful, necessary in moments, but still a mask. Psychologist Carl Jung called this the persona, the face we wear to meet society. It's not fake, it's adaptive. Without it, we'd stumble socially, but trouble begins when we mistake the mask for the face. Think of the persona as clothing. You wouldn't go to a job interview in pajamas or to the gym in a tuxedo. You adapt to context. The same is true for psychological clothing. Around family, you wear one outfit. At work, another. With friends, maybe a looser one. These outfits are fine until you forget they're outfits. Then you live as if your yoga pants are your skin. The true self, by contrast, doesn't need costumes to be real. It is the spark from fire. It's the you before conditioning, before applause, before fear taught you who to be. It can use any mask without becoming trapped in it. It can mother when needed, love when free, build when called, seek when drawn, and then release each role without collapse. So why do we cling to masks? Because they keep us safe. Society rewards predictability. Families reward loyalty. Employers reward reliability. Masks reduce friction, but over time, they also reduce freedom. A mother mask without choice breeds resentment. A lover mask without depth breeds emptiness. A professional mask without softness breeds isolation. A mystic mask without grounding breeds judgment. The mask protects, then suffocates. The transition to true self begins with awareness. Notice when you feel triggered. Triggers are the mask screaming for survival. Shame when you relax. That's the mother mask. Restlessness when you commit. The lover mask. Discomfort when you're vulnerable. The professional mask. Guilt when you indulge. The mystic mask. Each trigger reveals the bars of your cage. Awareness alone isn't enough. You need to practice non-attachment. Non-attachment doesn't mean rejection. It means relationship. You can wear the mask without worshiping it. You can care for your family without defining yourself solely as mother. You can pursue pleasure without abandoning commitment. You can achieve without equating self-worth to promotions. You can seek spirit without rejecting humanity. Non-attachment is the art of playing roles without being played by them. The body, again, is central. Masks live not only in thought, but in muscle memory. They dictate posture, breath, tone of voice. To loosen a mask, experiment with shifting the body. A mother mask softens when you breathe slowly instead of rushing. A lover mask grounds when you hold still through restlessness. A professional mask loosens when you drop your shoulders and let silence hang. A mystic mask anchors when you plant your feet and look directly at the ordinary world. Body shifts create psychic shifts. Ultimately, the true self isn't found by smashing masks. It's revealed when you stop mistaking them for identity. It's the awareness that notices, the spark that shines through every role. When you live from there, you can play the archetypes with artistry instead of compulsion. You're not a mother. You're not a lover. You're not a professional. You're not a mystic. You're the fire that contains them all. But how do you actually work with this in daily life? How do you move from insight to transformation? That's where the shadow comes in. The shadow is the part of you that didn't fit the mask. It's not evil, it's exiled. If your mask is mother, your shadow might hold carefree pleasure. If your mask is lover, your shadow might hold responsibility. If your mask is professional, your shadow might hold vulnerability. If your mask is mystic, your shadow might hold messy humanity. The shadow isn't your enemy, it's your unlived life. The psyche pushes these parts down because they threaten identity. The mother can't be irresponsible. The lover can't be steady. The professional can't be soft. The mystic can't be selfish. So those qualities get repressed. But repression doesn't erase, it leaks. In criticism, in envy, in compulsions, in breakdowns. What you judge most harshly in others often signals what you've disowned in yourself. Integration begins with recognition. Ask, what do I envy? What do I judge? What do I avoid? Those questions shine light into the shadow. If you resent carefree people, your lover energy is starving. If you mock dreamers, your mystic is in exile. If you pity weak people, your vulnerability is waiting. If you feel jealous of nurturers, your mother energy wants expression. Every irritation is a breadcrumb. The next step is practice. You don't have to overhaul your life overnight. Small, deliberate experiments loosen the mask and welcome the shadow. A mother can schedule guilt-free pleasure. A lover can commit to finishing one long-term project. A professional can practice saying, "I don't know," in safe spaces. A mystic can allow herself to enjoy money or admit anger. These micro-moves integrate disowned energy without overwhelming the system. Emotions are part of the method. Triggers aren't failures, they're data. When shame, guilt, or fear surface, don't suppress them. Track them back to the mask. Ask, what am I defending? What am I afraid this says about me? Beneath the charge is the shadow, waiting to be reclaimed. Working with emotions this way transforms triggers into teachers. Support helps. You don't have to do this alone. A coach, therapist, or conscious community can mirror blind spots. They can encourage your experiments and call out when the mask reasserts itself. The danger isn't noticing too much, it's noticing too little. Integration is not perfection. You'll never eradicate masks. You don't need to. The goal is flexibility, when you can move between archetypes consciously, You stop being trapped by one. You become whole, not by becoming everything at once, but by choosing fluidly from the full spectrum of yourself. And here's the paradox again. The more you integrate, the more distinct you become. Instead of being defined by a single mask, you shine as the person who can't be reduced to one. You become the spark, shifting forms, never confined, always burning with the same essence. Which brings us to the final note. What SEP's really at stake here isn't SEP personality typing. It's SEP's freedom, the kind that lets you live as more than one thing at once. You've met the 4 archetypes: the mother, the lover, the professional, the mystic. You've seen their gifts: care, vitality, mastery, depth. You've seen their shadows: guilt, avoidance, isolation, judgment. You've explored the persona, the mask that protects but confines, and the shadow, the exiled parts that wait to return. You've heard how these ideas were born in messy human lives, sharpened by tension, carried forward by collaboration, and you've seen how they apply now, in the tug-of-war between responsibility, freedom, ambition, and meaning. The point isn't to label yourself forever. It's to recognize the mask you've mistaken for skin, to loosen its grip, to welcome back the parts you've disowned, to play the full range instead of one note, because when you do, something changes. The guilt eases, the compulsions soften, the choices multiply, and beneath it all, the spark glows steady. That spark is your true self, not defined by role, not limited by persona, not split from the fire. It can mother without martyrdom, love without fear, achieve without armor, seek without shame. It can shift roles without collapse because it knows they're costumes, not prisons. It burns with the same essence, no matter the form. So here's the challenge, and the invitation this week. Notice your mask. Where does it tighten? When do you feel trapped? Which judgments keep you small? Then experiment. Add 1 drop of shadow back into your life. 1 hour of joy without guilt. 1 promise kept past the boredom. 1 confession of vulnerability. 1 laugh at your own imperfection. These aren't luxuries. They're doors. The world doesn't need more people locked in archetypes. It needs sparks, humans who can move fluidly, love fiercely, build wisely, and dream deeply. Humans who know that roles matter, but don't define. Humans who live from the fire. The mask will whisper that it's dangerous. It will warn that you'll be judged. Maybe you will, but freedom is worth more than applause. And integration gives you something applause never can: the quiet certainty that you are whole. So ask yourself now, which mask am I ready to loosen? Which shadow am I ready to welcome? And what would it feel like to live, not as a label, but as a spark, burning with the same substance as the fire itself? That SEP's not theory. That SEP's your life, waiting.